Good afternoon, my brother bishops, and welcome to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Virtual Plenary Assembly. I welcome the observers, members of the media, and the general public who are viewing the meeting today on the live stream. We're once again disappointed that we cannot be together in person for the meeting, but we are pleased to be able to share the proceedings with you. To reduce the risk of poor internet connections, some of the presentations have been pre-recorded. All question and answer sessions will be live. For those watching on the live stream, there may be a brief delay in the broadcast. I'm joining here in the studio by Archbishop Alan Vigneron, Vice President of the Conference, and Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell, General Secretary of the Conference. Again, thank you for joining us. We're hopeful this will be the last time we need to meet in this matter for a plenary assembly. Thanks be to God that the worst of the pandemic appears to be behind us. For your planning purposes, we do plan to meet in person in Baltimore in November. So to begin, I'm going to ask Archbishop Vigneron to lead us in an opening prayer. Archbishop Vigneron.
Thank you, Archbishop. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. We stand before you, Holy Spirit, conscious of our sinfulness, but aware that we gather in your name. Come to us, remain with us, and enlighten our hearts. Give us light and strength to know your will, to make it our own, and to live it in our lives. Guide us by your wisdom, support us by your power, for you are God, sharing the glory of Father and Son. You desire justice for all. Enable us to uphold the rights of others. Do not allow us to be misled by ignorance or corrupted by fear or favor. Unite us to yourself in the bond of love and keep us faithful to all that is true. As we gather in your name, may we temper justice with love, so that all our decisions may be pleasing to you and earn the reward promised to good and faithful servants. You live and reign with the Father and the Son, God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Archbishop. I now ask Monsignor Burrell to share some information with you about the logistics of this virtual meeting.
Thank you, Archbishop. Bishops, thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of the logistics for this virtual plenary assembly. The administrative and executive committees are grateful to you for your flexibility and understanding, as now a second plenary assembly is conducted in this virtual format. The USCCB is again working with the production company to assist us with a number of elements during the virtual assembly. First, the production company will be assisting bishops to come to camera to ask questions and other comments during the assembly. To be brought to camera, please use the raise hand feature in the meeting application by clicking first on the raise hand button. If you have an older version of Zoom, you may need to click the participant button first and then click the raise hand feature. If you do not see the raise hand feature in either location, you need to update to the latest version of Zoom. More detailed instructions for updating Zoom is being placed into the chat. If you need any assistance, please contact the Meetings and Events Help Desk. The contact information is now being displayed in the chat feature. And the raise hand feature is the way for bishops to come to camera to be heard. It is the parliamentary equivalent of the white, yellow, green, and red cards that are used during in-person meetings. Bishops will be called in the order in which they raise their hand. If you lower your hand, you will need to start over. All participants were muted upon entry. We ask that everyone remain muted until you are recognized by the president by using the raise hand feature. Please wait until you see yourself on camera to unmute and to begin speaking. Second, The meeting application polling feature will be used in place of what are typically voice votes for such matters as approval for agenda, meeting minutes, and other motions from the floor. When the motion is made from the floor, the president will ask for a second to the motion. At that time, the production company will enable the chat feature in Zoom, and a bishop who wishes to second the motion should enter the word second in the chat. The president will then announce the name of the first bishop who seconded the motion. After the second is recorded in the chat to host feature will be disabled. The polls will appear on your screen at the appropriate times. Please choose aye, nay, or abstain from the polling menu. Results will be tabulated by the virtual platform and displayed. Third, electronic ballots will be used to vote on most action items being presented during the plenary assembly. A sample ballot is being displayed. Depending on the size of your screen, the ballot may appear unclear, but this is for illustrative purposes only. The ballot you use to vote will be an online form. Each item will be voted on separately, but rather than voting at the conclusion of each chairman's presentation, which is the usual process when meeting in person, voting will be conducted after all the presentations are completed. Further instruction will be provided at the time the president calls for voting. Fourth, online forms will be used to submit amendments to any of the 4 amendable documents. This is the same process that was used to submit modifications. You may access the online form through the Bishops Only website. The link will be posted in the chat later today as well, and instructions will be reviewed after the chairman conclude their preliminary presentations. Fifth, as you are aware, you entered this meeting through a virtual attendee hub with 2-factor authentication. This means you logged into the attendee hub and then to the meeting application. It is suggested that you leave the hub open in your internet browser until the conclusion of the assembly each day. This will allow you to more easily gain access to a session if you leave or take a break. This is especially important on Friday for easy access between the public and executive sessions. You will need to revisit the hub on Friday when general session ends and executive session begins. If you do log out of the hub during the assembly, you will have to log back using 2-factor authentication process. At any time during the meeting, if you have a technical concern or question, please contact us via the email address or help desk phone numbers that we are now placing into the chat. The help desk contact information was also emailed to you and is posted on the Bishops Only website. Last, again, as Archbishop Gomez mentioned, some presentations have been pre-recorded. In most cases, the committee chairman and other presenters will be available with us live to take questions in real time. Further instruction will be provided at the end of each presentation. Thank you, Archbishop.
Thank you, Monsignor, for the helpful information. Now, brothers, I would like to recognize our new members who have been appointed bishops since our last plenary assembly in November of 2020. Most Reverend David Bonner, Bishop of Johnstown. Most Reverend Larry Kulik, Bishop of Greensburg. Most Reverend Jerome Fuju, Bishop of St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. Most Reverend Gary Janak, Auxiliary Bishop of San Antonio. Most Reverend Daniel Felton, Bishop of Duluth. Bishop-elect James Golka, Bishop of Colorado Springs. Bishop-elect Italo De Loro, Auxiliary Bishop of Galveston, Houston. Bishop-elect William Koenig, Bishop of Wilmington. Bishop-elect Gregory Gordon, Auxiliary Bishop of Las Vegas. Congratulations to all these new members of our conference. Please note our prayers for you as you begin your ministry. Also, a warm welcome to all retired bishops. 46 of our emerita are able to be with us today. Thank you for joining us. As it is custom, let us now say a prayer for our deceased brother bishops. I'll call your attention to the prayer card in your documentation and the slides being displayed on the screen. Eternal rest unto them, O Lord.
And may perpetual light shine upon them.
Grant, we pray, Almighty God, that the souls of your departed servants, bishops, Gerald, Vincent, and Joseph, to whom you committed the care of your family, may, with the manifold fruit of their labors, enter the eternal gladness of their Lord, who lives and reigns forever and ever.
Amen.
Now, I invite Monsignor Boren to read our message to the Holy Father on behalf of the USCCB.
Thank you, Archbishop. Most Holy Father, gathering in plenary assembly virtually from across the United States, the members of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops prayerfully turn our thoughts to your holiness. We thank you, Holy Father, for your continued pastoral guidance during this global pandemic. Early on in your March 2020 Urbi et Orbi message, you reminded us how Jesus called his disciples to have faith during a great storm. We are always humbled by this gift of the Lord's presence, that in the midst of upheaval, Christ is with us. And the light of Christ is always our hope and our guide. As it becomes physically safer to gather in person, we look forward to inviting people to attend in-person celebration of Eucharist. After enduring a long fast, this will be a great joy for many. We ask for your prayers, Holy Father, as we look at developing a program of Eucharistic revival for our dioceses and eparchies. This initiative will be enriched by the universal process of prayer and listening, to which your holiness has invited the Universal Church as preparation for the 2023 Synod of Bishops, communion, participation, and mission. Slowly entering post-pandemic life, we remember those for whom society's return to normal will not restore the same rights and privileges that many enjoy. Following your concern for the poor and the marginalized, we remember those who have long been excluded from the full benefits of society, especially those who live with chronic illness, disability, mental suffering, tenuous immigration status, and those in prison or in poverty. The mission of the Church to tend to the poor has never been more needed. With you, we also recognize the Church's need to bring comfort to those who suffer from job loss, the loss of community, of a loved one, feeling alone, from the moral suffering of grave injustice and social division, and from sometimes painful lack of fraternal charity. As we consider post-pandemic life, we affirm with you that the normality to which we are called is that of the kingdom of God. In communion with you, Holy Father, and with each other, may our witness to the Spirit of Christ bear much fruit, not only in the lives of those who are well, but most especially in the lives of the weak, the vulnerable, the afflicted, and the suffering among us. Your Holiness, we pray for you and humbly ask you to bless our assembly and the work that lies before it.
Thank you, Monsignor. Now, it is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome His Excellency Archbishop Christopher Pierre, our Apostolic Nuncio, Archbishop Pierre will greet us shortly. Joining us from the Nunciature, I welcome as well in service to the Apostolic Nunciature, Monsignor Seamus Horgan, First Counselor, Monsignor Denis Kurupasiri, First Counselor, Monsignor Michael Morgan, Counselor for Legal Affairs, and Father Luca Cavada, Secretary. Welcome to you all. Now, brothers, we will now vote to approve the agenda for this meeting. As you know, we have a number of actions before us over the next 3 days. In addition to some timely updates on various efforts from our conference, including an update on the recent meeting on migration matters that was held with bishops from the United States, Mexico, and countries in Central America at Mondelein Seminary. Of the 9 actions, 4 are amendable documents, including 3 liturgical texts and the pastoral framework of marriage. 3 are requests to this body to approve the drafting of statements of the body. Potential formal statement for Native American Alaska Native Ministry. A potential national pastoral framework for youth and young adults. And a potential document on the Eucharist. I have heard from many of you about the proposed document from the Committee on Doctrine on the meaning of the Eucharist and how we plan to address it during this meeting. Many opinions have been expressed. I also want to share with you that I received a letter from Archbishop Agustin de Noia, Adjunct Secretary of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, in response to the information that I sent to the congregation regarding this topic. Take a moment now to read this letter to you. Your Excellency, on May 24, 2021, this congregation received your memorandum sent to the bishops of the United States, which included a brief outline prepared by the Doctrine Committee to propose to the body in June. This dicastery is grateful for the information and looks forward to the informal review of the eventual draft of a formal statement on the meaning of the Eucharist in the life of the Church. Taking this opportunity to offer you my personal regards and profound religious esteem, I remain sincerely yours in Christ, Archbishop Agustin de Noia. So I just wish to remind you of our process regarding the development of statements issued by the body of bishops. Before a statement or document is drafted, the body must first be asked whether it desires to issue it. This is what we did some time ago to initiate the pastoral framework on marriage. And the result is that the document is now before this plenary for the usual process of modification, amendment, debate, and vote. In the case of the documents on Native Americans, Alaska Natives, youth and young adults, and the Eucharist, the body is likewise being asked whether drafting of these texts may begin. It is not to approve the texts. If drafting is approved, the texts will come to us at a future meeting, and they will be amendable at that time. This is the process of the conference. We will hear more of these topics from the chairman. Bishops will be able to ask questions and begin to offer their input to the committees. Bishops will have the usual 5 minutes to speak and will be called upon in the order in which they raise their hands. As Monsignor Boren mentioned, the raise hand feature takes the place of the cards we use during our in-person meetings. Whether you are speaking for or against a topic, or you have a question, or wish to raise a point of order, you will use the raise hand. So at this time, we need a formal motion and vote to approve the agenda, which was sent to you electronically. You will indicate your approval via the meeting's polling feature. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Archbishop Viñero just moved. Do I have a second? I understand that Archbishop Broglio has seconded. Please now use the raise hand feature if you wish to offer any discussion about the agenda. I will pause to see if there are any raised hands. Brothers, please remember to wait until you see yourself on camera to begin speaking. Archbishop Lori.
I had to second the agenda.
Agenda. Thank you, Archbishop. Anybody else who wants to speak at this time? Archbishop Gerard? What you wanted to say? Archbishop Gerard, you want to speak?
Resolutions. I'm sorry, no, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Archbishop Pfeiffer, you want to say something?
Archbishop, I ask that we add to the agenda what I consider the most important issue, pastoral moral issue before us as bishop in our country at this time. It's the fundamental and background to the issue of our Catholic president receiving Holy Communion. That's important. But a more basic issue is that I propose on the agenda that we would allow time and making a plan to deal with the many presidential orders and plans and actions to increase abortion already. One of them is most special because it deals with what we call infanticide, the direct murdering of a helpless, suffering little baby that survives the brutal process of abortion. And our president wants every taxpayer American to pay for that, including everybody taking part in this meeting because we're taxpayers. This violates our conscience, and to say we don't take any action or try to not let that happen, then it means in some way we are implicitly giving formal cooperation, formal immoral cooperation. So I ask that we take time to discuss these terrible abortion issues of our president and develop a plan or a strategy to counteract them. What I would propose as an ideal is what Archbishop Naumann sent us last week to deal with the Hyde Amendment. There he pointed out very clearly a plan that all of us and all of our Catholic people need to be involved in. I'd like to see something similar for infanticide, for codifying Roe v. Wade, and on down the line. So I ask that we put that issue on our agenda.
Please state your motion for the record. So your motion is exactly what?
It is, Archbishop, that we present on the agenda for discussion the development of pastoral moral plans or strategy to deal with the many critical new abortion initiatives of our president, especially the one about infanticide, where the president wants to approve, and taxpayers pay for it, the murdering of precious little babies that survive the brutal process of abortion. That's my proposal, and that we would develop a plan similar to what Archbishop Naumann sent us last week of how to deal with one of those critical issues, the Hyde Amendment.
Thank you. Thank you. 1 second. I think Bishop Pfeiffer, you are asking for a change in the agenda. So I would like to ask Archbishop Schnur, our parliamentarian, to help us with this motion. Unmute yourself. Archbishop, could you please unmute yourself?
It's a motion to amend the agenda, and therefore there has to be a second. But I think there's a question that I don't have the answer to, but maybe the General Secretary does. Can a retired bishop introduce an action item?
Thank you, Archbishop. No, he is not able to. A current voting member of the conference may do so. I do wonder if perhaps we could have some kind of update that's given during the meeting from Archbishop Naumann as chairman of the committee. Many of these items that Bishop has mentioned is in the ongoing work and the ongoing plan of the committee. That maybe that might be a possibility.
So, Bishop Pfeiffer, it seems that your motion cannot be accepted as a motion from a retired bishop. So do you agree that the suggestion of Monsignor Burrill about asking Archbishop Naumann to make a report on all of those issues?
Because I'd like it to include the issues that I mentioned. It's more than just one. I was using as a model the proposal of Archbishop Naumann as regards the Hyde Amendment. But there's other real critical issues that need to be handled or discussed at this meeting. I hope some bishop would make a proposal to do that. If I can't do it as retired bishop, then I would ask some bishop to please do that for me, because it's such a critical issue.
Agree that Archbishop Naumann can make a presentation.
So maybe another bishop will make that motion. We have to ask.
Okay, so we hold it for now. So, Archbishop Rosansky. Unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself.
Archbishop Gomez, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the body of bishops as we prepare to discuss the weighty matter of the communion document that will be presented by our doctrine committee. All of us have experienced many Zoom meetings over this past year, and thank God for the ability to do so because of the COVID virus, to be able to meet. But we also know its limitations that are even evident as we begin our meeting today. As we meet once again by Zoom to discuss this topic, we are keenly aware that we are looking for consensus. And so I would ask that at this meeting, we allow time for each bishop to speak on this important topic. This topic and its implications are so far-reaching that putting limits on the amount of time given for our discussion will not help us or our people as we discern which course must be taken. Such an open invitation to all who wish to speak is a necessary pathway for building the collegiality and unity that we need in this critical issue. Already hampered by our meeting through the Zoom medium, it would be wise to allow all bishops who wish to express their insights about this proposed document be given the time that is both suitable and proper. I urge that this opportunity be offered for all who wish to speak, so that the fullest discernment may be achieved at our meeting. We owe this to our people and to whom we are privileged to serve, and to the needs of our church in this particular moment of our history. Thank you, Archbishop Gomez.
Thank you, Archbishop. At the moment when we come to the approval of the document, there will be time for for bishops to speak, as you are saying. So that's one option. The other option is that sufficient for you, or you want to make a motion to change the agenda?
I would like to change the agenda to allow time for any bishop who wishes to speak on this matter to be able to do so, not to limit it by time.
Okay, so, okay, that's you. The motion is to have time for every bishop to talk about that. Is that correct? So, is there a second? Please type the word second into the Zoom chat feature if you wish to second Archbishop Rosansky's motion.
It fails if there's no second.
Okay, I understand that Cardinal Tobin has seconded the motion. Yes, Cardinal Tobin. Right. So now we have a motion and we have a second. So I now invite discussion on Archbishop Rosansky's motion to add time in the agenda to talk about this issue. Any discussion? Anybody wants to talk about it? Bishop Tyson?
Yes, I think it's important that every bishop can be heard on this important topic. So that's why I would speak in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Tyson. Anybody else? Bishop Duane?
I have not asked for the floor. Not asked for the floor.
Thank you. Archbishop Kurtz?
Thank you so much, Archbishop, for the opportunity to speak to this. I'm certainly in no way against a full conversation. However, I think our focus ought to remain on, I think, what you said to begin the meeting, namely that the Doctrine Committee is asking concurrence to be able to prepare a document. There will be, I think, if the body of bishops agrees to it, there will be ample time, I would think, at the plenary meeting, and in fact, it will be face-to-face, which you and I will welcome, I think, in November. My big concern, of course, is that if this would in any way delay the process going forward, then we're faced with the problem of having to wait until November in order to give the Doctrine Committee the opportunity to move forward with the draft document, because normally next spring meeting would not be a business meeting. It would then relegate the conversation a full year and a half from now. And I think that would be a painful delay. So I would simply say that if there could be conversation, but in a way that allows us to vote on moving forward with the Doctrine Committee proposal, then I would favor it. If it would mean a delay in actually what the Doctrine Committee is proposing, then I think I would oppose that proposal. Thanks. How do I get off of this now?
Archbishop Naumann?
Yes, I would second what Archbishop Kurtz has said. I think this full discussion that's being called for really will best be accomplished when we have a draft of the document before us. We're just asking, the Doctrine Committee is just asking to draft a document. I don't think this is the time to have that robust a discussion. And I agree with Archbishop Kurtz. I mean, actually, I think this is a delaying tactic that will make it impossible to get this document to be voted upon in a timely manner. So I would oppose the motion.
Thank you, Archbishop. Archbishop Sampo.
Yes, I also concur and would want to move ahead with this. And I think that, you know, as I recall in my 15 years in the conference, when we have a discussion about different matters, oftentimes there has to be ultimately a limit on the time for discussion in the end. And so I don't know if I can, well, there are many times that all the bishops who want to speak have had the opportunity to speak, but I can also remember many times when there was a very heavily discussed topic where eventually there had to be a time limit put on the discussion when there had felt like there had been enough of an input from the body of bishops. And as already been said, we're just talking about here the Doctrine Committee preparing a draft document. I'm sure whatever time is on the agenda already for discussion of approving the drafting of that document will be sufficient for the Doctrine Committee to be able to have enough input from the floor of the bishop to assist them in the drafting of that document and its content. But as I would concur with what others have said, that full discussion, which is certainly to be very lively, I'm sure, is better done when we have a draft of the document before us and something to debate and discuss and modify and amend, and then either approve or not approve as a conference, and to build that consensus and unity that we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop. Archbishop Laurie.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I hope we will have the opportunity, certainly, to have an ample discussion, that people who, all of us, want to express our views and our opinions. But I think the point of this is to give the drafting committee a sense of the House, a sense of what the major concerns and insights are, try to reflect those as best they can in the draft, and then we'll have ample opportunity to amend the document and to talk about it in person. So I think it's just a prudential judgment how much time you offer, but I think the point of it is a sense of the House to help the committee do its work and to do its work well in drafting what is essentially a teaching document about the Eucharist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Archbishop. Archbishop Coakley.
I would concur with the last few speakers and suggest that we will have plenty of time to debate this important document once it is drafted, but to lift the time limit at this point on allowing every bishop to speak would seem to amount to little more than, as Archbishop Naumann said, a delay tactic or a filibuster. So I would be strongly in favor of moving forward, limiting the time for discussion, and allowing us to vote on whether to draft the document or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop. Bishop Stowe.
Gomez. I noticed that in your opening remarks, you quoted from a letter from Archbishop de Noia, but you did not mention the letter from Cardinal Ladaria, who I believe set forth a process by which we should discuss and take our time with such an important document about a central teaching of the Church. Rather than seeing this as a delay tactic, it seems that some of the brother bishops want to rush this discussion and to focus the emphasis on a teaching document on the Eucharist about whether our Catholic president is able to receive communion. At the very minimum, I think we need to be able to hear every bishop on this issue, as Archbishop Rosansky has proposed, and take our time with something that is so important and so delicate. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Stowe. I didn't mention the letter of Cardinal Ladaria because you all have it, and the other letter, you don't have it. So that was the reason for which I didn't mention it. But obviously, as you said, it is an important document. Bishop Olsen.
Thank you, Archbishop, and thank you, brother bishops. The proposal for this document by the Doctrine Committee in the drafting of it does not preclude conversation or statement among the bishops. In fact, for each bishop to talk in their own diocese and then also to come together. We're also considering these issues with regard to the Eucharistic revival that's being planned and the contribution of the Evangelization Committee on this. The Holy Father has been very mindful to caution us and all bishops around the world from approaching discernment from a parliamentary stance, as many of our brothers have articulated as well. I'm afraid that to mandate, or if we introduce and say every bishop needs to speak, it introduces, first of all, the sense of a filibuster to stifle speech, actually, or then also to create a false and unnecessary imperative and mandate that every bishop has to speak on this and it'll be judged. And because unanimity is not consensus. And so the process, as Archbishop Gomez mentioned at the start of our meeting, is just to be initiated. And it's going to work in tandem with the Evangelization Committee, with the whole body of bishops and the drafting of the document and its scope and purpose that is far beyond and far more fundamental than the disciplinary issues that are mentioned for those politicians and other people in public life who are fundamentally and publicly at odds with the question of producing the question of scandal. So I would like to say that we not introduce more time on the agenda for this and leave that to the discretion of the chair at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Olsen. Bishop McKnight.
Thank you, Archbishop. I would speak in favor of the motion for a couple of reasons. One, I think it is unfortunate that there's been a yoking of too many important decisions in this one document without the proper process and the consultation that needs to take place, as clearly identified in the letter of Cardinal Ladaria. And I do not take his letter as just one letter among many. I think it is a very important process and pathway that we should follow. And the parliamentary tactics that has been raised as a concern, some might perceive how this has been brought to us in this fashion as problematic. And I would, at the very least, all I'm asking for, along with those who would be in favor of this motion, is that every bishop who wishes to speak to this matter would be given the opportunity. Failure to do that, I think, would indicate to those who are watching, as well as those who might be evaluating how we are processing this decision, whether or not we have given a full hearing. I do not think that Ladaria's letter is asking our conference committees to talk to one another. I think it's asking for individual bishops to be involved in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Bishop Candela.
I also wanted to speak in favor of a prudent and normal amount of time to discuss starting a draft and then moving to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Bishop Tyson.
Thank you. I also want to again speak in favor of the vote. I don't want to get ahead of the discussion, but I think this shouldn't be seen as a delay. I think a lot of us are wondering, we already have a statement from 2006 on this topic. Why are we authorizing a new one? I think that's going to be a key question when we get to it. I agree. I think we need to take Pope Francis's comments on synodality very seriously, that synodality is not the same as a parliamentary process. But given that this framework is a straight up or down vote, I think it's just important that we give every bishop a chance to speak who wants to speak. It's not a mandate. It's simply, being focused on whether or not we need to have a new draft when we have a document from 2006. Thanks.
Thank you. Bishop Murphy.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. As someone who cannot vote, I'd like to associate myself with what Bishop Olson said. I think, my brothers, we are pastors, and it says pastors that we're going to be trying to put together something that's really inspiring about the Eucharist. I think Bishop Cousins has already given us a wonderful way of going forward, and I suspect that will and should have a big influence on the issue that's currently under discussion. And so it seemed to me that we need to have something substantial from the committee before from the doctrine committee, before we start to get up and just say what we feel or what we think or what we want to do. Please don't let the media try to push us into acting in a way that is parliamentary, to use the Holy Father's word, but rather we must remember that we act always as pastors. Thank you.
Thank you. Archbishop Wester.
I'd like to speak in favor of Archbishop Brzezinski's motion. To me, these are two...
Recording in progress.
To me, these are two distinct issues at play, the beauty and the importance of the Eucharist and the question of who approaches the sacred sacrament. Now, I'm not sure if this is the time or not. It seems we're debating how much time to give the topic, but my concern is that if we're voting to bring this issue back to the doctrinal committee for a paper, that we should separate these two issues, the beauty of the Eucharist and who approaches the sacrament. And so if this is the time to make that intervention, I would make it. That's my concern, that this would go back to the doctrine committee and have them do what it looks like they're going to do, and then we would vote on it later. But I think that now's the time to separate the two issues. The question of who should receive the Eucharist, as Bishop Tyson said, we took that up already. I think that conflating these two issues will only lead to further discord and division among ourselves and our people. Separating the issues allows us to find common ground by providing more time for in-depth discussion on a neuralgic and complicated question while at the same time providing a venue conducive to attentive listening in a more serene and thorough manner, as Cardinal Ladaria is suggesting, and I think giving us very excellent advice on that. So therefore, I think that we need to separate the two issues, and that's what we need time to be able to come to that resolution, and I think we need to do it today and not wait for this draft to come back next November. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop. Cardinal DiNardo.
Thank you, Archbishop. I want to thank you and the administrative committee for what they have given us thus far through the approach from the Doctrine Committee. It has gone through the necessary consultation. My thought on the matter is there will no doubt already has been some comments on the document that is being given. My understanding is this document is much larger than any one issue. And that's good. I think that in one sense, those who are looking for tons of discussion today are already going to limit the issue. So I'm opposed to the Archbishop of St. Louis's suggestion. I think we should go ahead and vote up or down, or whether the Doctrine Committee, along with many others, should do and should write this document. An important one on the Eucharist in all of its aspects, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Bishop Rhodes.
Thank you, Archbishop. With some of the comments that have been made, just want to highlight what our outline has. The outline for the document is broader, as Cardinal DiNardo just said. The themes of the Eucharist, mystery to be believed, mystery to be celebrated, and mystery to be lived. The more controversial part under mystery to be lived is the reflection that we propose to do on Eucharistic consistency. And there's a lot of good prior documents on this. We certainly want to hear the opinions of all my brother bishops on this. And I think what we plan to do is completely in accord with what Cardinal Ladaria communicated in his letter. We are no longer proposing a national policy. That idea of a national policy, was in the original proposal to the administrative committee, but we never meant it as it's been interpreted in many media sources. In light of Cardinal Ladaria's letter, we are not intending to propose any kind of national norms. We would propose looking at what Eucharistic consistency means and the theological and doctrinal background to the Church's discipline regarding reception of the Holy Eucharist. Maybe this brings a little more clarity of what the Doctrine Committee is proposing, although I would be explaining this more fully on Thursday, tomorrow. So I hope we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Rhodes. Karen Supich.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this discussion. I would just point out one thing with regard to points that have made in terms of how we have had discussions in the past, limiting time and so on. That was when we met in person and we were able to raise a green or a red card, and that we were acknowledged in an alternating fashion. That is not going to be the case here. It's going to be first come, first serve. And so it's not, I think, conducive to having a balanced discussion to read the mind of the floor here. And that should be kept in mind. And that's why I favor Archbishop Rozansky's measure. The other thing is, while I was heartened to hear what Bishop Rhodes said about the document, it's very clear, however, that the language within the draft does cause concern, particularly in view of articles and statements made by members of the hierarchy in the United States about demanding that, in fact, we move in this direction.
So that has colored the perception of this document. And I think that is why we need to have a full discussion. And I would also go back to the Cardinal Laudari letter. He said, even before we begin thinking about any document, we should have both a serene and extended discussion among ourselves. That has not taken place. And we should also have a discussion with Catholic politicians who have positions that are in conflict with the teachings of the Church to find out why they have those positions. That too has not taken place. And the document does name political officials, the draft does, when it talks about Eucharistic consistency. So I think all of that, that brings us to the moment in which we need to hear from one another about this. The virtual setting is going to be very difficult for that to happen in the first place, especially since we're not going to be acknowledged for or against in an alternating way. So I speak in favor of Archbishop Rozansky's motion.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Bishop Burbidge.
Thank you, Archbishop. I respect the work of the administrative committee that proposed this agenda item to go forward and suggested the time frame for it. I think the discussion we have now seems out of place before we even have allowed Bishop Rhodes to make his presentation. Even his brief comments now give us a very good perspective, but I don't think we should be anticipating, will all the bishops have enough time or not have enough time to speak? Not allow this discussion to go forward and to hear from a chairman of the committee who's prepared to make a presentation, I think would be a mistake.
Thank you, Bishop Burbidge. Bishop Carver.
Thank you, Archbishop. Very briefly, I have voted no to both of our virtual assemblies consistently because I don't think it allows us to fully discuss with one another beyond these formal acknowledgements on the virtual settings. When we meet virtually, we lose the opportunity to bump into each other in hotel hallways, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, during vesting for Mass, over a drink, over our cherished ice cream treats. And that's precisely why I think this motion is important, because we do not have the opportunity to really visit with each other aside from formal interventions. And I believe what Cardinal Laudari is calling for and what Pope Francis's notion of synodality is all about would include those kinds of informal opportunities. So I'm opposed to doing official business of the conference virtually, categorically.
Thank you, Bishop Carver. Archbishop Cordelione.
Thank you, Archbishop Gomez. Thank you for calling on me. Point out that is taken. It would be impossible for 300 bishops to speak when we have available.
Archbishop, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I was saying that the motion as made had no time limit on it. And so I just point out the physical impossibility for if every bishop were to speak. we have about 300 bishops at this meeting. It would be impossible, physically impossible, for every bishop to speak. There has to be a vote taken at some point. So even if we extend the time of the discussion and debate, there has to be a call for a vote at some point. So we can't just leave it completely open-ended. And the process is the same as when we are in person. Likewise, in our in-person meetings, it's first come, first served. When bishops raise their hand, when the hand is seen, the name is written down, and it goes in that order. So our discussion virtually, in that sense, won't be much different than in the in-person. It will be different in other ways, especially the offline discussions. But in terms of being called on, it will not be different.
Thank you, Archbishop. There are, as I said before, I was thinking that Archbishop Cordelione is going to be the last one speaking to us about this issue. There are several others that I understand that are raising their hands, but this has been a long time, and I think it's clear that what are the opinions of most of the bishops. So if it is okay with you all, I would like just to call for the vote. So I would like to go back to Archbishop Rosansky and see if you can briefly state again your motion for the record.
Thank you, Archbishop Gomez. Yes, I would like to propose that in our discussions on the communion document, that we give time for any bishop who wants to speak the ability to speak during our discussion.
Thank you, Archbishop. So, brothers, we can make your selection. Monsignor Burrell is going to remind you how to do the voting. Thank you, Archbishop.
Bishops, at this time, we will now have the opportunity to vote on this motion that the Archbishop Rosansky has made. And we will, if you please take the time to make your selection. What is required for this vote is a simple majority.
So we have 59% opposed to the motion of Archbishop Rosansky, so the motion failed. Thank you, Archbishop Rosansky, and thank you all for the time in discussing this issue. So we are now ready for the poll to approve the agenda overall. So please make your selection. Monsignor Burrell, any specific instruction for that?
No, Archbishop, at this time, we will have a vote to vote for the acceptance of the entire agenda, the agenda that has been proposed. And again, it'll be a simple majority.
So the result is 86% approved. So the agenda is approved. So, Monsignor Barnett, you want to say something?
Thank you, Archbishop. Just to follow up on some of the comments, as far as the back and forth of the discussion for when bishops offer their questions and reflections, what will happen is you will indicate by hitting the raised hand feature, and that automatically puts you in the queue. And then we will go in order, as Cardinal Supich mentioned, we'll go in order of when you hit the raise hand feature, and we will go back and forth for a period of time, as the normal process is for the debate. In some respects, this, dare I say, this is almost more accurate than in person as far as calling on the names, because we will know every person. You know how there are times where we don't see your hand, or staff is trying to figure out exactly who it is. So they will have every name, every person that hits the raise hand feature will be recognized, and they'll have the 5 minutes, the allotted time to speak. I just wanted to offer that clarification. Thank you, Archbishop.
Thank you, Monsignor. Brothers, now I would like to welcome and introduce the tellers for this spiritual meeting. It's going to be Most Reverend Larry Collick, Bishop of Greensburg, Most Reverend Elias R. Lorenzo, Auxiliary Bishop of Newark, and Most Reverend Douglas Lucia, Bishop of Syracuse. Brothers, thank you for your assistance and willingness to serve in this way. I also welcome and thank Archbishop Dennis Schnur, Archbishop of Cincinnati, who will again serve as our parliamentarian. So I now invite a motion to approve the minutes of the November 16, 17, 2020. These were made available to you with the meeting documentation. Again, your approval will be recorded via the polling feature. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Archbishop Vigneron moved. And do I have a second? Archbishop Broglio has seconded. Is there any discussion? Please use the raise hand feature to be heard. I will pause to see if there are any raised hands. No hands, no raised hands. So now we are now ready for the poll. Please make your selection. The motion is approved with 96%. So obviously the minutes are approved. Now, brothers, this time I would like to invite the address of our Apostolic Nuncio to the body of bishops. So we have Archbishop Pierre with us.
My dear brothers in Christ, I greet you in the name of Pope Francis, assuring you of his closeness, fraternal support, and prayers as you gather for this virtual assembly of the Episcopal Conference. I am looking forward to being with you in person soon. I thank His Excellency Archbishop Jose Gomez, Archbishop of Los Angeles, and the President of the USCCB, as well as Monsignor Burrill and the staff of the USCCB for the invitation to speak to you. When I spoke to you last November, I reflected on Fratelli Tutti. At that time, I spoke about the challenge of healing the world as it emerged from the pandemic. Unfortunately, the pandemic continued longer than we anticipated here and continues around the world. Although the vaccines have brought hope to many that things may return to something resembling to a normal way of life, our world and this country have been profoundly changed. The Church herself has been affected, and now, throughout the country, many dioceses are planning how best to help people to return to Mass and to begin once again to be the Church that Christ calls us to be. But which type of church is that? In Fratelli Tutti and again, in the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith's document, Samaritanus Bonus, the model proposed is that of a good Samaritan church that goes forth with compassion and mercy in solidarity with those who suffer in order to bring them through healing. As we emerge from the pandemic, we must ask ourselves, are we a church that responds to the true needs of our people? It seems to me that Jesus would often look out at the vast crowds and see their suffering and would satisfy their deepest hungers and desires, including the desire for mercy. Without disregarding the law, Jesus understood the mission entrusted to him by the Father to proclaim the kingdom, to restore sight to the blind, to help the lame walk and continue their journey with God, to restore health to the leper, to help the deaf to hear the words of salvation, and to preach the good news to the poor. As the Church in the United States emerges from the pandemic and looks to invite people back to church and attract new members, she would do well to learn from Jesus, both in content and in method. The content, beginning again from Jesus Christ. When I began my mission in the United States, one of my first engagements was to deliver the St. Agnes lecture in Pastoral Theology at Immaculate Conception Seminary in Huntington, New York. There I emphasized the need for the proclamation of the Kerygma as the means of evangelization. But why? At that time, I quoted the then Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio in his book-length interview, El Jesuita. Some, I quote, some choose a Mass based on how priest preaches, but after 2 months, they said that the choir is not working well, and then they turn to change again. There is a reduction of the religious to the aesthetic. It is like a changing of the shape in the religious supermarket. It is as if the religion is a product to be consumed, very much linked to my taste and to a certain type of diffuse theism carried forward within the parameters of the New Age, where it is mixed a lot with personal satisfaction, relaxation, and well-being, end of quote. What does all of this really mean for us today? Well, the Pope continued, I quote, I would say that the gravely serious thing that all this is expressing is a lack of personal encounter with God, of an authentic religious experience. This is what I believe creates, in the end, the religion à la carte. I believe that one has to recover the religious act as a movement towards an encounter with Jesus Christ, end of quote. For this to happen, rather than getting bogged down in the minutiae of complicated theological concepts or in slick but superficial marketing campaigns, we must be bold like Simon Peter on Pentecost and proclaim Jesus Christ. I place before you the words of St. John Paul II at the conclusion of the Great Jubilee. I quote, conscious of the risen Lord's presence among us, we ask ourselves today the same questions put to Peter in Jerusalem immediately after his Pentecost speech. What must we do? We are certainly not seduced by the naive expectation that faced with the great challenges of our time, we shall find some magic formula No. We shall not be saved by a formula, but by a person and the assurance which he gives us, I am with you. It is not, therefore, a matter of inventing a new program. The program already exists. It is in the plan found in the gospel and in the living tradition. It is the same as ever. Ultimately, it has its center in Christ himself, who is to be known, loved, and imitated, so that in him we may live the life of the Trinity, and with him transform history until its fulfillment in the heavenly Jerusalem. This is a program which does not change with shifts of time and cultures, even though it takes account of time and culture for the sake of true dialogue and effective communication. This program for all times is our program for the third millennium. So said John Paul II in his apostolic letter Novo Millennio Ineunte in the number 29. The kerygma, the proclamation of the good news, is not a traditional custom or a certain social practice. The kerygma is the joyful announcement that Jesus Christ is a living person to be encountered, who through his resurrection has defeated sin and death. When Christianity is reduced to custom, to moral norms, to social rituals, it loses, sooner rather than later, its vitality and its existential interest for the men and women of our day, particularly for those who are looking for hope after the pandemic, for those seeking authentic justice after the racial strife we have experienced, or for those who have come here seeking a brighter and safer future. It is one thing to meet the material needs of the poor, but Christianity offers more than a NGO or a social service organization. The Church offers salvation in the person of Jesus Christ. When Christian morality asserts itself without Jesus Christ, even though the theological and philosophical conclusions might be correct, it does not penetrate the heart in a way that leads to conversion. Christian morality, Christian culture, and Christian values are part of the action by which we show forth the newness of Christian life, which flows from the encounter with Jesus Christ. In other words, what is often lacking in the process of evangelization, and we certainly need to evangelize and catechize now more than ever, is beginning again from Jesus Christ. To begin again from the experience of mercy that is offered to us, although we have sinned, is to reform our life with the help of grace so that our freedom, rather than alienating us, helps us to conform that life to the plan of God. The starting point, therefore, cannot be to shame the weak, but to propose the one who can strengthen us to overcome our weaknesses, especially through the sacraments of reconciliation and the Eucharist. With respect to the latter, Holy Communion is not merely a thing to be received, but Christ himself, a person to be encountered. A Catholicism that confuses itself with a mere cultural tradition or which cannot distinguish itself from other proposals, including political or ideological ones, that are based on certain values, will never be convincing to that generation or to the new ones. Jesus Christ is a person, not a concept. He is the one who can make all things new. Pope Francis tells us, I quote, "Our Lord Jesus Christ burst forth into our history, marked by its vulnerability, with an incomparable dynamism, full of strength and courage." That is the kerygma, the nucleus of our preaching, the proclamation about the bursting forth into our history of Jesus Christ in his incarnation, death, and resurrection. The method, encounter and dialogue. Earlier, I said that we would do well to learn from Jesus, not only in terms of the content of our preaching and teaching, the kerygma, but also from his method. Jesus' method was one of encounter and dialogue. That is important for us during this Amoris Laetitia year of the family. The encounter with families, even broken ones, and to accompany them on their journey through thoughtful dialogue. We know that families are hurting economically, emotionally, and spiritually. We also know how many members of the flock struggle to live the faith. We wish they would understand the faith perfectly and act in accordance with right reason and consistently make good choices. But we are not a church of the perfect, but a pilgrim church in need of the mercy offered generously by Christ. Consider his encounter with the young rich man. Here was a man who had actually kept the commandments and inquired what more he must do. Jesus gazed upon him with love, already seeing the desires of his heart. He invited him to sell his possessions, to give to the poor, and to follow him. The man's face fell because he had many possessions. He was not yet ready to follow. Jesus loved him no less. The rich young man was not perfect, but Christ challenged him without crushing him. That the man was sad offers hope that perhaps his conscience would be awakened and that one day he would know the joy of being a disciple. The method is clear: to encounter, to accompany, to love, to engage in respectful dialogue, and to challenge without crushing, in the hope of deeper conversion. Jesus used the same method in his encounter with Zacchaeus. Jesus was conveniently passing by when he saw Zacchaeus in that sycamore tree. Although Zacchaeus had many possessions, he was hated by his own people, but with insistence, Jesus called him, "Come down from that tree. Today, I must stay at your house." Jesus spent time with him, and at the end of the day, Zacchaeus was a changed man. Then there is the unforgettable encounter between Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus did not shy away from dialoguing with a woman and a Samaritan. He did not attempt to skirt around the truth of the way she was living. Rather, he thoughtfully, lovingly, and progressively exposed her to the light of truth, offering her life-giving water and a path forward. And she was able to leave behind her jar of water and the burden of sin to tell others about Jesus. The late Cardinal Jean-Louis Torrent describes what this dialogue might look like. I quote, "The response is always, and in any case, a dialogue, an encounter. The only possible road is that of an unarmed dialogue. Substantially, in my opinion," says Torrent, "to dialogue means to go toward another unarmed, with a conception of truth that is not aggressive and yet not disoriented." At the heart of dialogue is the communication of one's own personal life to others. It is a sharing of the existence of others in one's existence. It is not always about proving oneself to be right. It is about mutual sharing of persons that deals with how to live and how to show solidarity. As Christians, our dialogue should express the lived Christian experience, not as a type of moralism, but as a grace which we have received from our initial encounter with Christ. The goal of this dialogue should be unity, and not merely doctrinal and juridical unity. Last November, we spoke of the social friendship and the fraternity desired by the Holy Father. His visit to Iraq and the early fruits of that visit demonstrate that the Church can give an authentic witness to Christ and can make concrete contributions to building peace and unity. Christ himself sought to build unity, to be a mediator between God and man, to help reconcile sinners to the Father. He founded his church to be a sign and instrument of unity. And our own unity as a church and even as bishops can offer a powerful witness to the gospel. Christ himself at the Last Supper prayed that all may be one as we are one, so that the world may believe. The Church in the United States has already shown itself capable of such a daunting task. In response to the abuse crisis, it answered with a unified and concerted effort that showed care and compassion for the plight of survivors. It provided for the needs of the immigrant community. It stood in solidarity with the persecuted brothers and sisters throughout the world by providing material and spiritual closeness. It came to the rescue of those affected by natural disasters. It spoke with one voice in defense of the dignity of all peoples and against the scourge of racial inequality. These examples point to the undeniable truth that unity is possible and that the Church in the United States has numerous experiences of it. The dynamic of unity depends upon the bishops in a particular way. As successors of the apostles, they have a responsibility for the unity of the particular church entrusted to their pastoral care. Such unity is expressed in the communion of faith, the sacramental life, and the evangelizing efforts of each local church. A singularly important expression of this unity is the communion between local churches and the See of Peter. Although written for an ecumenical context, the four dimensions of the dialogue described by John Paul II in Ut Unum Sint can be helpful to illumine the path towards greater unity. The dialogue of charity, of conversion, of truth, and of salvation. The dialogue of charity demonstrates the love Christians have for one another and for all human beings. Reciprocal respect of the dialoguing partners is necessary so that sufficient trust may exist to move forward toward unity. The dialogue of conversion entails zeal for the unity of the Church, an openness to being changed by the other, and a receptivity to the new dimensions of understanding and to the gifts of God's grace that emerge in the dialogue. Here, dialogue is an encounter between persons with and in Christ who changes hearts. The dialogue of truth makes it clear that the conversation is not one of compromise, of false Irenicism, but an authentic discernment utilizing the scriptures, tradition, history, and theology. This requires speaking the truth in love. No unity can be found except in the truth. This was something affirmed by Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti, namely that dialogue must be related to the truth. The solution is not relativism, says the Pope. Under the guise of tolerance, relativism ultimately leaves the interpretation of moral values to those in power, to be defined as they see fit. It is possible to be concerned for truth, to seek the truth that responds to life's deepest meaning. Pope Francis is convinced that dialogue is the best way to realize what always ought to be affirmed and respected, but that it cannot exclude the conviction that it is possible to arrive at certain fundamental truth, always to be upheld. Finally, there is the dialogue of salvation, which refers to Christ's saving call to the individual Christian and the saving mission of the Church in the world. Inasmuch as dialogue is carried out for the purposes of furthering both communion and cooperation, it is part of the dialogue of salvation. Unity of action can lead to unity of faith. Can we, the Church, facilitate the type of dialogue that produces unity among ourselves and among the human family? Our commitment to this type of dialogue, one which produces unity of faith and action and not merely talking about things endlessly, will strengthen the Church's credibility as she accompanies people who are looking for a place to belong and are returning to church after the pandemic. As a conclusion, I would say, what type of church are we? I am firmly convinced that emerging from the pandemic, we need to be a church that proclaims with conviction the basic kerygma and the person of Jesus Christ. And we need to be a church that follows the method of Jesus, which is one of accompaniment of dialogue, a dialogue directed towards salvation. What type of church are we? Last November, I proposed that we try to be a Samaritan church. Now, during this Amoris Laetitia year of the family, I offer a complementary image of the church, mentioned in Lumen Gentium, that of the family of God, the house of God in which his family dwells, the household of God in the Spirit. The family is above all a school of communion. It teaches the art of unity in diversity. The dynamics of family life help broaden the narrow confines of an individualistic mentality. It fosters a unity founded on love and mutual respect. In my own family, we were 6 siblings. Obviously, not all of us were walking at the same pace. I remember our father saying, I quote, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." The family is also a place of belonging, a privileged place to experience love and growth, an original sign given by God the Father. Often, the family is described as the building block of society, but it is also a pivotal means by which we are introduced into a decisive relationship with God, with truth, beauty, and goodness. The family exists, in part, to help generate life, but also, and significantly, to deepen companionship between individuals as they journey toward their common destiny. Is it this what our respective dioceses and parishes are like? In the family of God, in our companionship as believers and as shepherds, we continually meet and encounter the event or person who gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. In the family, we behold the mystery of Christ present as a face. We learn to confront difficulties and to face the realities of life, enlightened by his presence. In the family, we also learn to encounter Christ in the other. In the family, in our parishes, dioceses, our companionship begins to coalesce or come together in a space, in a daily living and working together on a common journey with a common goal, our destiny with God. Can we be a church that facilitates this encounter with God through our proclamation and patient dialogue? Emerging from the pandemic, what are the possibilities for us of welcoming new members to the family or making those who have been away feel at home? My brothers, it is our task to welcome our brothers and sisters with open arms and with them to be a synodal church, a church that works together toward our common goal, which is heaven. After all, we have been through. We must begin to walk again. We must begin again from Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Archbishop Pierre, for inviting us to this deeper reflection on unity, encounter, and dialogue. Your message is most timely as we emerge from the global pandemic. Much healing is needed. May we hear your words as we deal with the challenges facing our church and nation. Brothers, please join me in a round of applause for our Apostolic Nuncio. Archbishop, thank you. Be assured of our continued prayers for your ministry. Brothers, at this time, parliamentary procedures indicate that I cede the chair to Archbishop Vigneron as I deliver my presidential address.
Thank you, Archbishop. Please go ahead.
Greetings, my brothers. I pray that you and your people are well. I know we all hope this will be the last time we are forced to gather virtually. I wanted to say a few words today and offer my perspective on some of the challenges and opportunities we face in the coming months. To begin, I'd like to assert something obvious. We have been living through some extraordinary times. We've seen a pandemic shut down our civilization, including the church, for more than a year. We have lived through riots in our major cities, rising social divisions and unrest, and maybe the most polarized election our country has ever seen. Even with the lockdowns ending, our neighbors are still struggling. They've lost loved ones and livelihoods. Many have lost confidence in God and hope for the future. After being isolated for months, some have grown distrustful of our leaders and institutions. I know that we all know this, but I think it is important to be reminded. As we all realize, the Church's mission will be shaped for years to come by the troubles of these recent months. I was noticing, even before the pandemic, how often Pope Francis talks about the importance of unity, not only among peoples, but also unity within the Church. In Fratelli Tutti, the Holy Father sets out his program for rebuilding the world after this pandemic. He gives us a beautiful vision of the unity and common destiny of the human family in God's providential plan. This vision has been inspired to me in thinking about my own ministry. It seems to me that in these times, when society is so divided, the Church has a great duty to more fully reflect the unity that God wants for His creation and His people. It's not realistic to expect the Church to stay immune for the pressures of division. Those pressures are all around us. The Church is divine. She's the body of Christ. But we are all human in the Church, after all. And we are living in a secular society where politics is becoming the substitute religion for a lot of people. So we need to guard against the temptation to think about the Church in simply political terms. In his homily for Pentecost, the Holy Father said, "Today, if we listen to the Spirit, we will not be concerned with conservatives and progressives, traditionalists and innovators, right and left. The Paraclete impels us to unity, the harmony of diversity. He makes us see ourselves as parts of the same body, brothers and sisters of one another." The Church's unity is made real and visible in the Eucharist. That beautiful image from the Church's first days remains our ideal. They devoted themselves to the Apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Unity in the Church does not mean conformity of opinion or that bishops will never disagree. The Apostles argued passionately. They disagreed over pastoral strategies and methods, but never about the truth of the gospel. In the wake of this pandemic, Our Holy Father is calling us to strengthen the unity of the body of Christ. What he said recently to the bishops of Brazil is also important for us. It is possible to overcome the pandemic, he said. It is possible to overcome its consequences. But we can only do so if we are united. The Bishops' Conference must be as one at this time because the suffering people are one. Only a church that is united can heal the brokenness and challenge the injustices that we see more clearly now in the wake of this pandemic. The gospel we proclaim is the truth of salvation. It is also the most powerful force in history for promoting human dignity and human flourishing. The power of our Catholic vision flows from our profound awareness of the unity of life, from conception to natural death, and the unity of the human family, every person a child of God. What God wants for the human family is meant to be reflected in the unity of the Church, which is the family of God. One of the saints said, "All with Peter to Jesus through Mary." By seeing ourselves as part of the Church and united to our brothers and sisters in the faith, we understand more deeply that we are brothers and sisters of all mankind, for the Church has been sent to all peoples of the earth. And as we know, brothers, there are forces at work right now in our culture that threaten not only the unity of the human family, but also the very truth about God's creation and human nature. Our Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI has said, "This is the age of sin against God the Creator." Pope Francis has stressed the truth of these words and said, "The problem is worldwide, the exploitation of creation, the exploitation of persons. We are experiencing a moment of the annihilation of man as the image of God." So, my brothers, we stand at a historic crossroads, as our Holy Father is telling us. It falls to the Church in this moment to defend the truth about God the Creator and the truth about the sanctity of the human person and the unity of the human family in God's plan for creation. This is our mission, the urgent task of the whole Church in this moment, after this pandemic, in the face of the chaos and confusion in our society. And I'm thinking that it has to start with me and with all of us. So my prayer is that we all remain united in what is essential, our love for Jesus and our desire to proclaim him as the living God and the true path for humanity. One last thought, brothers. As you know, I have a deep devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And when I was growing up, my family went on pilgrimage to the shrine in Mexico City nearly every summer. And I found myself turning to her a lot during these days. I was reflecting on how the popes see her apparition as a sign of unity for the continent. St. John Paul II called her shrine the Marian Heart of America. Later this year, we celebrate the 490th anniversary of the Virgin's apparition. So let us look to her in this moment and entrust all our challenges to her maternal heart. May she help us to keep our hearts humble and united in the service of Jesus, as we seek to continue the evangelization of our country and our continent in this moment. Thank you, brothers, for listening, and may God bless you and your ministry.
Archbishop Gomez, thank you very much for your very powerful words, which are clearly the words that come from the heart of a pastor. And as you say, we all know we're at a crossroads, and very much appreciate your read of the signs of the times, which invite all of us to do likewise, so that we can renew ourselves in taking up the mission of the Church, as the nuncio said, to proclaim Christ and his love, And so for all the brothers, I want to say thank you for your leadership to us. You have been our president in a remarkable time, a time unprecedented in the history of our conference. And for all of us, I express gratitude that you have worked so very hard to keep alive the work of our conference and help us to continue to be faithful to our mission in these days. You speak of Our Lady of Guadalupe and your devotion to her. I think in some ways it's another manifestation of Mary in the Cenacle. Mary is the Queen of the Apostles. And so I pray that she strengthen your apostolic heart and that we're all strengthened in the apostolate. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Archbishop. Thank you, Archbishop. Brothers, we are running late, as you can see. So I was thinking that maybe we can have just a brief break, maybe 10 minutes break, and that we can go then to the next, the agenda. So, Monsignor, you want to give some instructions before we do that?
Yes, Archbishop, we'll have a 10-minute break, but please do not log out. Stay with us. It will avoid complications of trying to get back into the system. So please do not log out. Thank you.
So, brothers, please do not disconnect or log out. So I'll see you again in 10 minutes. Brothers, welcome back. Brothers, welcome back. I know that we are already scheduled time for the meeting today, but we have several important things that we need to talk about, including the preliminary presentation of the action items that we need to go through during the meeting. So it's going to take a little while, maybe 40 minutes or something like that. So we hope that you stay with us and that we continue and finish the meeting. So first, Brother Bishops, I'm pleased now to turn your attention to Mr. Scott Voynich, Chair of the National Advisory Council, to deliver the Council report. Mr. Voynich's remarks are pre-recorded. However, he will be here to take live questions after his presentation. Mr. Voynich, please proceed.
Good morning. Thank you for providing time for me to report on the National Advisory Council meeting held in March of this year. We are blessed with the participation of Archbishop Thompson, Bishop Scharfenberger, Brennan, Chomnicki, and Bonner in our meeting. The perspectives, wisdom, and guidance that they add to our process is invaluable. In March, we virtually brought together 43 lay and religious from around the country to attempt to represent the church in miniature. We're privileged to have an incredible cross-section of faithful come together to make our best efforts to support our bishops. We work to provide our perspective on the proposed agenda, offer insights, and possible opportunities to help fulfill the goals of the strategic plan, and finally, provide a respectful temperature check by gauging and expressing messages and concerns that resonate from our members. The diverse backgrounds reflected in Knack membership are strengths that we honor and affirm and hope to see continue. Add to that the respected code of confidentiality in place for all of our deliberations, and we have an environment rich in its opportunities for growth and discovery. The unfortunate limiting factor that we struggle with is the same one you encounter. Virtual remote meetings lack the personal human interaction desperately needed to truly provide a completely fulfilling outcome. But we, like you, do the best we can until we can come back together, which we hope is soon. We believe that we made the most of this recent experience and that our members engaged fully, thoughtfully, and with love for the church. We were fortunate to receive briefings from General Secretary Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell, as well as USCCB staff representing committees associated with items on which we were asked to vote. We profile voted on those items, as well as 3 Knack Resolutions we will present for your consideration. We recognize that the concept of the Eucharistic Revival Project would inspire our members because it offers so much opportunity to help renew and return the faithful. To support the project, we engaged in breakout sessions to explore strategies and concepts to assist and enhance the outcomes. I will now report on our sessions. Members endorsed requests from the Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance in support of giving time on the June 2021 Plenary Assembly agenda for consultations on the causes for the canonization of a priest, servant of God Joseph Verbies Lafleur, and a religious brother, servant of God Marinus Leonard LaRue. Knack members also endorsed requests from the Committee on Clergy, Consecrated Life, and Vocations to add 3 questions to the agenda for the 2021 regional meetings related to the ongoing formation of priests. Knack also endorsed requests from the Committee on Cultural Diversity in the Church concerning authorizing a publication on Chinese American Catholics, time on the agenda for the June 2021 General Assembly for a full consultation with all of the bishops to authorize the development of a new formal statement and vision for Native American and Alaska Native ministries, and a request for 15 minutes on the agenda of the June 2021 Plenary Assembly for a report on the subcommittee on the pastoral care of migrants, refugees, and travelers. From the Committee on Divine Worship, Knack members endorsed approval of the inclusion of the ISIL Gray Book of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of the Church, on the June 2021 Plenary Meeting agenda. From the same committee, Knack also endorsed approval of the ISIL Gray Book Order of Penance and the ISIL Gray Book of the Liturgy of the Hours, additional intercessions, and Psalter concluding prayers for placement on the June 2021 Plenary agenda. This second item, while endorsed, did receive a higher number of abstentions, which we believe was because of an interpretation of a text. Knack members gave their support for the recommendation from the Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis, approving 30 minutes on the agenda on the June 2021 General Assembly on the proposed Eucharistic Revival Project led by the Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis. Enthusiasm for a Eucharistic Revival Project in whichever form extended to the Knack's devotion of substantial time on its agenda to consider and comment on the current proposal. Also, from the same committee, Knack members supported allotting 30 minutes on the November meeting agenda for the Subcommittee on Catechism to make an oral report on the status of and challenges to its present work. From the Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth, Knack members approved but gave less support for allotting 10 minutes on the June 2021 General Assembly agenda for a vote on drafting a national pastoral framework on youth and young adults. 6 members abstained and 4 members disagreed or strongly disagreed. Some of the lack of support, we believe, was founded on a concern for the logistics, timing, and costs of mounting the event for youth. Also, from the same committee, Knack members gave support to placing on the June 2021 General Assembly agenda a 2-stage approach to the approval of the pastoral framework for marriage and family life ministry. Now, I will turn to Knack Resolutions. Knack members strongly supported our first resolution, Special Message on Episcopal Communications and Media. This resolution recommends efforts to strive towards fair, faithful, and informed communications across all media platforms to strengthen consistency and effectiveness of public messages reflecting the unified position of the Catholic Church. The members of Knack were deeply engaged in this topic, uniformly expressing concerns about conflicting messages from bishops and the resulting theme of division, casting doubt on the teaching authority of bishops as a whole. Recognizing that the Catholic faith and what defines it is in the national spotlight today, our members are desperately looking for clarity and consistency in Catholic teaching. We discuss the value of comity and dialogue and diverse thought and offer these concerns for further reflection and analysis of possible solutions and use of common resources to work towards more common messaging. The second Knack resolution relates to informing and counseling bishops and religious superiors on seminaries. The goal is to ultimately provide resources to bishops and religious seminaries superiors to help them more fully evaluate and vet seminary offerings to best meet the needs of individual seminarians. Although academic accreditation resources exist, bishops and religious superiors are left on their own to discover strengths and weaknesses of different institutions' ability and resources to provide spiritual, pastoral, and human formation pillars. The concern is that this anecdotal approach is not providing many the true insights needed to best direct seminarians to the right institutions for their specific needs. Our hope is that a national resource would be of great value to our bishops and provide transparency in the selection process for these seminarians. Our third and final Knack resolution addresses assessing COVID impact on dioceses and parishes. Knack is recommending evaluative research to result in the publication of recommended proven resources to aid in addressing the challenges and opportunities of the COVID-19 pandemic. Good data and substantive research, accompanied by assistance from qualified professionals, should inform our pastors of best practices as our faith communities work to recover from the substantial impact of the pandemic. Existing organizations have the capacity to assist in such studies and offer tools that could provide great benefit at the parish level. Now, turning to the Eucharistic Revival Project. In recent years, the Knack members have expressed their concern, if not their alarm, shared with the bishops about the marked rise of unbelief in the real presence in the Holy Eucharist. They engaged in lively, diverse discussions in response to the proposed Eucharistic Revival Project placed on the June 2021 General Assembly agenda for discussion. Members had lots to say during brainstorming sessions. There was virtual unanimity of the Knack members that the bishops of the United States should pursue a sustained, focused, and national effort to instill and nurture belief in the real presence. Some members critiqued the proposal in its current state, expressing that it falls short of the challenge that the Church faces. Notably, there was concern that a plan as envisioned could be received as a burden on, rather than an inspiration for, our priests if the bishops impose it from the top down. Members suggested great care that the project address both reasons for unbelief and build foundations for conversion. They emphasized teaching, instilling, and strengthening belief through creating conditions for personal encounters with Christ. Some proposed that the project should focus primarily on youth as the principal catechizers within their families and parishes. Members recommended that in the planning and structure for Eucharistic Revival Project, the bishops early on align with the Church's many dynamic lay and youth movements, such as Focus and Net Ministries. Among the consensus themes of remarks of the members, emphasize beauty and reverence in our liturgies. This kind of comment followed one member's intriguing question: does lack of reverence for the Eucharist lead to unbelief, or does unbelief lead to lack of reverence? Catechize the fundamentals of our belief in the real presence with widely available and accessible materials in all media, expressed in simple and beautiful terms. Hold more teaching masses. Make Eucharistic adoration much more available. Promote the sacrament of reconciliation. As for culminating in a national congress after 3 years, rather begin with a national event that sends people out to the parishes and dioceses, or instead of a national event, hold several regional events. There were many other comments, all of which the Knack has given to USCCB staff. Finally, the members were hopeful but urgent. Some believe that a Eucharistic Revival Project would probably be the Church's one shot for the next decade to turn the great tide of unbelief. As one member urged, let's make it count. 43 faithful gathered for 3 days to attempt to provide thoughtful feedback and counsel from the Church in miniature. The spirit and tone of the entire meeting reflected a high level of engagement, interest, and most importantly, love for the Catholic Church. We hope that the insights we offer reflect that love and respect for our faith and for your important roles as our bishops. You face many daunting challenges in today's environment, and we want you to know that we're here to support you as you shepherd us through the pastures of life. You are in our prayers. On behalf of the National Advisory Council for the USCCB, thank you. I would now be available for live Q&A via Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Voynich. Brothers, please use the raise hand feature if you have questions for Mr. Voynich. So no questions. So Mr. Voynich, on behalf of my brother bishops, please know of our gratitude to you and all of the Knack membership for the time, dedication, and advice you offer us. You provide tremendous value to our church, and you are very much appreciated. We also thank Archbishop Charles Thompson, Bishop David Bonner, Bishop Mark Brennan, Bishop Paul Hominski, and Bishop Edward Scharfenberger for their service on the Knack. Brothers, thank you for assisting in this important work. Now, my brothers, at this time, we will hear preliminary presentations of the 4 action items, which are amendable. Following the chairman's remarks, there will be an opportunity to ask questions or clarification only. We will have the debate and vote on these items tomorrow. Amendments are due at 7 p.m. via the online form that Monsignor Burrell mentioned earlier today. He will review the instructions for submitting amendments before we adjourn today. First, we turn to the Committee on Divine Worship and Archbishop Leonard Blair to give a preliminary presentation on action number 4, which is the ICEL Great Book of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of Church. Archbishop Blair, please proceed.
This is the first of 3 action items from the Committee on Divine Worship. Back in 2018, the Holy Father inscribed the celebration of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of the Church, in the general Roman calendar. As you know, it is observed on the Monday following Pentecost. The Mass texts are already found in the Missal among the votive Masses of Our Lady, and the hymns were already included in the collection of hymns for the Liturgy of the Hours that we approved in 2019. So our vote tomorrow mostly concerns the other texts for the Liturgy of the Hours and the entry for the Martyrology, and you've received these texts in your documentation. From April 16 to May 20, the bishops had the opportunity to propose modifications for this action item, and there are none for this text as a result of that consultation. So the text you received in your documentation is the text that will be brought to the floor tomorrow. This action item is amendable, and approval of the text will require affirmative vote by 2/3 of the Latin Church members of the USCCB, with subsequent confirmatio of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. For the purposes of our parliamentary procedure, I'll read the action item we'll be taking up tomorrow. Do the Latin Church members of the USCCB approve the ICEL Grey Book of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of the Church, for use in the Diocese of the United States of America? I now ask Archbishop Gomez to assist in facilitating the discussion of any questions of clarification on action item number 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop Blair. Brothers, as Archbishop Blair noted, there are no accepted modifications for action item number 4. Bishops who submitted modifications that were not accepted have been contacted separately. If a member wishes to propose any amendments to the text or propose reconsideration of a modification, it should be submitted as an amendment via the online forms app today by 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And I invite questions or clarifications only. We will have additional time for debate and vote tomorrow. Please use the raise hand feature to be heard. Again, we are not using the color cards during the virtual event. please use the raise hand feature in Zoom to present a question for clarification. I will pause to see if there are any raised hands. So I have no questions. So thank you again, Archbishop Blair. We look forward to further discussion, action item number 4 tomorrow, in addition to the vote. We can now move on to your second amendable document. So Brothers Archbishop Blair will now provide a preliminary presentation on action number 5, which is the ICEL Grey Book on the Liturgy of the Hours, additional intercessions, and Psalter concluding prayers. Please proceed, Archbishop.
Thank you, Archbishop. Brothers, we continue to make steady progress on a new edition of the Liturgy of the Hours. Several votes remain, and we're hopeful that we might have a completed new edition published and ready for use by 2025. The next piece that the Committee on Divine Worship would like to propose for your approval is the ICEL Grey Book of Additional Intercessions and Psalter Concluding Prayers. We've already approved the intercessions for Advent, Christmas, Lent, and Easter. The text in your documentation covers the remaining intercessions, namely Ordinary Time, Saints' Days, Commons, and the Office for the Dead, as well as the shorter intercession formulas found in an appendix of the breviary. As for the concluding prayers, the majority will simply be drawn from the Missal, but the Liturgy of the Hours includes other concluding prayers not found in the Missal, and translations of these prayers are part of your documentation. During the period given for the review of the text, several modifications were proposed that the committee accepted. The table of accepted modifications for action item number 5 is available on the Bishops Only website. This action item is amendable, and approval of the text will require an affirmative vote by 2/3 of the Latin Church members of the USCCB, with subsequent confirmatio of the Congregation for Divine Worship. For the purposes of our parliamentary procedure, I'll read the action item we'll be taking up tomorrow. Do the Latin Church bishops of the USCCB approve the ICEL Grey Book of the Liturgy of the Hours, additional intercessions, and Psalter concluding prayers for use in the dioceses of the United States? I now ask Archbishop Gomez to invite discussion of questions of clarification for action item number 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop Blair. Brothers, as Archbishop Blair said, the accepted modification for action item number 5 are available on the Bishops Only website. And per practice, we will only review the accepted modifications. Bishops who submitted modifications that were not accepted have been contacted separately. If a member wishes to propose any amendments to the text or propose reconsideration of a modification, whether accepted or not, it should be submitted as an amendment via the online forms app today by 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I now invite questions or clarifications only. We'll have additional time for debate and vote tomorrow. Please use the raise hand feature to be heard. I will pause to see if there are any raised hands. So, brothers, no questions or clarifications. So thank you, Archbishop Blair. We will have further discussion on action item number 5 tomorrow in addition to the vote. We can now move on to the final amendable document. This is action item number 6. So, Brother Archbishop Blair's third and last preliminary presentation is on action number 6, which is the ICEL Grey Book of the Order of Penance. Please proceed, Archbishop.
Brothers, I think it's safe to say that most of the time when the sacrament of reconciliation is celebrated, the liturgical book for the ritual is not needed. The rite isn't complicated, and priest and penitent typically know what to say from memory or by using a small card of some sort. Nevertheless, the Church does have a liturgical book for the celebration of penance. Priests ought to be familiar with it, and the book is also very helpful for the organization of penitential services. ICEL has now prepared a new translation of the text, which you've received in your documentation. This new translation is not a radical departure from the current edition of the book, which was approved back in 1975. Even so, the committee is of the mind that the new translation is more precise than the current text and is more consistent with the other liturgical books, including the Missal. We also think that the publication of this edition can be the opportunity for a new catechesis, renewal, and promotion of the sacrament of penance. During the period given for the review of the text, several modifications were proposed that the committee accepted. The table of accepted modifications for action item number 6 is available on the Bishops Only website. This action item is amendable, and approval of the text will require affirmative vote by 2/3 of the Latin Church members of the USCCB, with the usual confirmatio of the congregation. Again, for the purposes of our parliamentary procedure, I'll read the action item we'll be taking up tomorrow. Do the Latin Church bishops of the USCCB approve the ICEL Grey Book of the Order of Penance for use in the dioceses of the United States? Archbishop Gomez, if you would please assist now in leading the discussion of any questions of clarification, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Archbishop Blair. Brothers, as the Archbishop noted, the accepted modification for action item number 6 are available on the Bishops Only website. And per practice, we will only review the accepted modifications. Bishops who submitted modifications that were not accepted have been contacted separately. Now, if a member wishes to propose any amendments to the text or propose for consideration of a modification, whether accepted or not, it should be submitted as an amendment via the online forms app today by 7 p.m. Eastern Time. At this time, I invite questions or clarifications only. We will have additional time for debate and vote tomorrow. Please use the raise hand feature to be heard. So now we'll pause to see if there are any raised hands. Bishop Aporki.
Yes, thank you. The footnotes in the introduction are very helpful, and I'm just wondering if those footnotes will also be contained in the published edition. And then the Appendix 3, the form of examination of conscience, is also helpful. Will that be printed as a separate booklet for the use of clergy and laity, so they don't have to buy the whole rite of penance, but just simply get the examination of conscience? So footnotes and then the appendix. My questions.
Thank you, Bishop. Archbishop Blair, any comments?
My inclination is to say that they are, but if Father Menke from the Divine Worship Office is available to us, I think he can confirm that or not. If Father Menke is available.
Yes, Excellency. I don't have the book in front of me. If those footnotes are part of the Latin edition, then they'll definitely be part of the printed books. Sometimes ICEL puts footnotes in that explain their translation, if they're referring to scripture passages, for example, and we typically do not. Those are just for your reference when you review the text. As far as publication, the various publishers have quite a bit of freedom when they want to publish worship aids, so cards and derivative things for the examination of conscience, for example, are permitted, yes.
Thank you, Father Menke. Cardinal DiNardo has a question.
Yes, Archbishop Blair, in the mode of translation of the rite of penance, was I so able to do perhaps a little less formality? In other words, I'm looking at the examination of conscience. Would that have been handled in the same way as parts of the liturgical text or received text, and allowed a certain amount of freedom?
Archbishop Blair, any comments?
My definite sense is that if I'm understanding your question correctly, the same norms or the same methodology would have been applied to any part of the book. I don't think there was a deliberate attempt to change what we call the register, of language with regard to one part or the other.
Thank you, Archbishop Blair. Bishop Esteves?
Archbishop Blair, the fact that the text that the priests know by heart of the formula will be edited for a better revision, would that create an issue of implications, legal implications, that some priests may not know exactly the formula, some may do the old formula, others the new? Would that create a challenge of implementation?
Thank you, Bishop Esteves. Archbishop Blair?
We had a bit of a discussion of that in the committee when we reviewed this. As I recall, and again, I would rely on Father Menke, who probably has that right in front of him, that there were two words, I think, that were modified, changed. But I think we said that sometimes we think those two words are even changed now. They're not at the very heart of absolution. Father Menke, would you want to comment on that?
Yes, that's what the committee discussed. The actual essential part of the sacramental formula hasn't changed, however. It's exactly the same, the words of absolution. So it's a couple of words are changed leading up to that. So yeah, it'll be, it might be frustrating for some priests to have to adjust what they've memorized, but the essential part of the sacrament hasn't changed, and there would be no question of validity if a priest used the old one out of habit.
Thank you, Father Menke and Archbishop Blair. I think there are no more questions. So, Archbishop Blair, I believe that covers it for today. Thank you for reviewing the documents with us. Now, brothers, next is the preliminary presentation from Archbishop Salvatore Cordelione, Chairman of the Communal Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth. He will present to us action number 9, which is a proposed pastoral framework for marriage and family life ministry in the United States, called to the joy of love. Archbishop Cordelione has already pre-recorded his presentation, but will be available for live discussion. Archbishop Cordelione.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Called to Love, Pastoral Framework on Marriage and Family Life Ministry. Brother Bishops, the Holy Father has announced the Year of Amoris Laetitia Family from March 19th until June 2022. This special year of attention to the family coincides with the 5th anniversary of the publication of his apostolic exhortation on the family, Amoris Laetitia. It is propitious and timely, therefore, that, as a body of bishops, we bring to completion the development of a national pastoral framework for marriage and family life ministry that not only reflects the best in diocesan marriage ministry, but also implements the teachings and recommendations contained in the apostolic exhortation to the benefit of families across our nation. The draft document, which you were given an opportunity to review prior to this assembly, has been subject to review and revisions from many standing committees and consultants over the last few years. Among these consultants are Catholic leaders representing diocesan marriage and family life ministry, as well as national organizations, to obtain a realistic perspective of the needs manifested by couples and families in parishes, dioceses, and society at large. Originally, a vote by the body of bishops had been projected for November 2019. Unfortunately, the vote was delayed until the following year, at which time amendable documents were not considered during the virtual fall 2020 General Assembly. Therefore, nearly 2 years later, we are now able to vote as a body of bishops on this pastoral framework for the care of our families. In light of the circumstances of the global pandemic and the Universal Church's initiative of the Year of Amoris Laetitia Family, which urges us to recognize ever more fully the centrality of the family as the domestic church, the committee recognizes that a vote of approval to publish this resource is increasingly urgent. I would like to spend a few moments now to provide an overview of the contents. The introduction of the framework sets the tone for this highly practical document by reviewing the realities of families today and the aim and audience of the framework. The purpose of this pastoral framework, which is an adaptable set of principles and strategies, is to assist dioceses, eparchies, parishes, and all those who serve the family in responding to the call to proclaim the gospel of the family, the joy of love, throughout our nation. It is not a work of theology, spirituality, liturgy, or apologetics. The primary audience is you, the shepherd of your diocese, together with your diocesan ministry leaders, ordained, consecrated, and lay, who serve and minister to and with families, especially marriage and family life directors in dioceses, eparchies, and parishes. The secondary audience is the couples and families we serve as a church. The introduction to the framework also reviews terms used within the framework and also the most effective way to make use of the framework. The framework is divided into 4 sections, which we call pillars. These pillars for strengthening marriage and family life are prayer, or building one's relationship with Christ; formation, which includes human, spiritual, intellectual, and missionary formation; accompaniment, which takes place in 4 major moments: during marriage preparation, during marriage, during the stages of family life, during complex or difficult situations of family life. Today, pastoral leaders face the challenge of addressing numerous marital and family situations that are more complex than in previous decades. The framework addresses many challenging areas by providing guidelines for pastoral care. Advocacy for the concerns and needs of marriages and families, such as affirming marriage between one man and one woman, and protecting the primary role of parents as the first educators of their children. Every pillar focuses on areas of concern and then proposes 3 areas of attention. These areas of attention are repeated throughout the framework as 3 E's: educate, encourage, and engage. Educate. This section suggests catechetical principles, knowledge, and skills that are a foundational part of pastoral care or needed to impart pastoral care adequately. This is the what, or foundation, for the Church's ministry. Encourage. This section suggests areas of encouragement to reinforce principles and meet specific areas of need that may be overlooked. This focuses on the who, or the recipients of education and care, or the pastoral workers who serve them. Engage. This section suggests strategies that may be used to implement the aforementioned principles for the pastoral care of families. These are the how, or practical steps of implementation. This section is followed by an explanation of how the framework may be implemented, primarily by way of the family through the joy-filled witness to the gospel and the parish as a family of families. Finally, our committee has created a comprehensive implementation and dissemination plan to ensure that the framework reaches widely to all dioceses, national organizations, and other constituents. By way of review, at our last assembly, the following steps were proposed and have since been implemented. In May, the Pastoral framework for marriage and family life ministry was made accessible in its entirety in draft form to bishops for review through the Bishops Only website. Individual bishops requesting any modifications were asked to email the Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth Committee by May 20th. The committee then reviewed and determined to accept or reject the proposed modifications. Earlier this month, the final document, including a table of the accepted and rejected modifications, was sent by email to all bishops prior to the General Assembly. At this General Assembly, the body of bishops has the opportunity to make amendments and vote on the final document. Our committee has reviewed the framework thoroughly and believes that this will be an important resource intended to assist pastoral planning for the care of marriages, families, and the domestic church. I'm asking, therefore, for your questions and any final amendments you would propose, and respectfully request an affirmative vote on this publication, which will be of particular significance during this year of Amoris Laetitia family. Thank you, brothers, for your attention. I will join you live for the remainder of my presentation in a moment. For the purposes of our parliamentary procedure, I will read the action item we will be taking up tomorrow in relation to the document now before us. Do the members approve the proposed draft pastoral framework for marriage and family life ministry in the United States, called to the joy of love? The accepted modification table for action item number 9 is available on the Bishops Only website. I ask Archbishop Gomez to assist in facilitating the discussion of the modifications and questions of clarification on action item number 9. Thank you.
Brothers, sorry we had a technical difficulty, and I hope that you are still there. So I want to thank Archbishop Cordelione for his presentation, and remind you all that the accepted modifications for action item number 9 are available on the Bishops Only website. Again, for our practice, we will only review the accepted modifications. Bishops who submitted modifications that were not accepted have been contacted separately. Now, if a member wishes reconsideration of a modification, whether accepted or not, it should be submitted as an amendment via the online format today by 6 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At this time, I invite questions of clarifications only. Debate and vote will be tomorrow. Please use the raise hand feature to be heard. I will pause to see if there are any raised hands. Karol Supich.
Thank you very much, Archbishop Cordelione, and to your committee for the work that you put into this. The three themes at the synod that produced, that was responsible for the Holy Father's producing of the document of Amoris Laetitia were encounter, accompaniment, and integration. I asked whether or not there was consideration to having those overarching themes as the way to structure this document. And I asked that because I noticed that there is absolutely no reference at all to chapter 8, in which the Holy Father deals quite, I would say, creatively with ways in which we can accompany, engage, that is, encounter, engage, and protect, particularly integrate people who have been in various situations that are not perfect, as he calls it, the weak. Was there any consideration to the three themes? And is there a reason why there's absolutely no reference, not even a footnote, to any of the material in chapter 8? Thank you.
Thank you, Eminence. Archbishop Cordelione?
The document certainly was inspired by the principle in chapter 8 of accompanying family special situations and difficult situations, and that is quite explicit in the document. So we did address that. The document focused heavily on encounter, and then especially accompaniment was a heavy emphasis of the document. Again, it is a pastoral framework, so it is a sort of a template that dioceses, parishes can use in developing their own strategies and pastoral plans for marriage and family ministry. So some of this would be determined more at the local level, but we certainly did explicitly address accompaniment of families in these special circumstances. I don't know if Dominic wants to weigh in any more in terms of the development of the document. It started before I took over as chairman.
Sure, and I think it started before I arrived at the conference, but I think that the encounter piece is in there, and the integration in terms of the accompaniment and what it's after. The pastoral framework dealt with the text of Amoris Laetitia, or its structure, more than the themes of the synod, and so that's why it has the current structure that it has.
Thank you, Archbishop Cordelione and Dominic. So there are no more questions or comments or clarification. So thank you, Archbishop Cordelione. We look forward to further discussion on action item number 9 tomorrow. So brothers, we are almost finished for today. As mentioned, if you wish to submit amendments to any of the 4 amendable documents that were presented to us, they are due by 7 p.m. today via the online Forms app. So now Monsignor Burrell will provide some instructions.
Thank you, Archbishop. Bishops, links to the online amendment forms are posted to the Bishops Only website. Additionally, staff have added them to the Zoom meeting chat. Please note that each amendable document is associated with a specific link. Before adding your amendments, please double check you are referencing the correct number. Once you have added your comments, you will be asked to enter your name and email address for validation purposes. When finished, click Submit. A confirmation page will display and an email confirmation will be sent to you. Should you wish to enter additional amendments for the same document, you can return to the beginning by clicking the link on the confirmation page. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsignor. Brothers, it's obvious that we went longer than we were expecting, so I just want to thank all of you for your patience. But I think we had a really active and fruitful conversation today, so I'm grateful for your participation, your interventions, and also for coming to a good resolution for all of us. So I want to, before we finish, I just want to thank all of you for your presence today.